Welcome to Reinvent and the Reinvent the Humanities to Change the World series, done in partnership with Georgetown University. I'm Pete Leiden, I'm the founder of Reinvent, and I'm going to help conduct this interview today. I'm also going to be helped by Catherine Temple, who's a professor at Georgetown, and she's the former chair of the English department. For now, though, we're going to focus on one of the last of our dozen interviews with people inside and outside academia to really probe at the value of the humanities now and going forward, particularly when it comes to practical value in solving big challenges that the world's going to face in the coming years. And with that, we have a terrific person to interview today, and that is Elñora Tena Webb. She's the president of Laney College, which is a community college based in the center of Oakland, downtown Oakland. It serves about 20,000 students a year, and it's kind of a well-known base here in the East Bay of the San Francisco Bay Area for training all kinds of students from different kinds of backgrounds. Of particular note to this series is that Elñora also, earlier in her tenure at Laney, was the dean of the Humanities, Language Arts, and Social Sciences Department in Laney, and there she has a deep appreciation of how the humanities plays, the role it plays in higher education. And she herself actually had started her own academic journey in the humanities. So we're very happy to have her here. Did you start out as a humanities major way back in the BA? Maybe we can welcome you and actually ask you to kind of tell a little bit about your background and maybe your role, your own connection to the humanities.
Absolutely. Well, first of all, it's an honor to be part of this series and to be with you and your colleague in particular. Yeah, I started off as an undergrad at University of California at Riverside, and I thought that I would be one of those individuals who'd save the world in my own way. It was only after I realized that I didn't have to go to school just to survive, because that was my intent initially. Somewhere in the process of doing more than survival, or ensuring that I could survive, I had to engage deeply in learning how to learn. And as a result of fighting to learn how to learn, I began to learn to function in ways that allowed me to demonstrate critical thinking faculties. I began to see the relationship among the different disciplines that I was exposed to: sociology, psychology, philosophy, the humanities, mathematics, education. I didn't see things in the compartmentalized way that we tend to organize them in higher education. And I can't tell you why. I just began to think in terms of brain research and how to connect it to the way I was functioning. I began to do things that were just transformative. And I didn't even know what was happening. I just knew that I was uneasy. I was uncomfortable. And in that state of being uneasy and uncomfortable, I began to learn more about me and my capacity. And as a result of that, I thought, wow, if education could do that for me, I want to be part of this thing called higher education. I wanted to be an educational ambassador, and I wanted to study more deeply these areas, especially broadly speaking, the humanities. And we know so many of these areas are deeply embedded in the humanities. Now, the takeaway for me as a young person, pre-20 and even in my early 20s, was that the power of learning through the humanities is much more remarkable than we give it credit. The humanities is about philosophy, okay? The study of ideas. It's about seeing the inner relationship among these seemingly desperate disciplines. We are one total system as a society. As human beings, we're related to everything that exists in this living organism we call life. And the humanities allow us to appreciate it at a deeper level in ways that actually pushes us out of these comfort zones that we've been socialized to accept. And that was the power of my early education at the university that inspired me to invest more deeply in learning about not only the classics, but also learning about people now, and engaging in the university and in the community.
It's fascinating, yeah. So clearly you personally have been touched with that. Now, over the course of your own academic career, you've PhD and various things that you've done, you've cycled back into really focusing at the community college level. And talk to us a little bit about what brought you to the community college level, what you see the importance of it, but also we're starting to interested in how the humanities might play a role there. But just tell us a little bit about how did you get into that line of that part of the kind of higher education system.
Yeah, let's see if I can be a bit more concrete than I was before, because I was reflecting on my experiences and even finding myself caught up in what I experienced as a child, and then I'm going to come full circle very quickly. So I was a foster child. And like a lot of foster kids, I was moved around from home to home across the county of Los Angeles. And I never felt I had a home, because I didn't. But I had shelter, which I was deeply appreciative of. So I went on to college because I didn't want to be homeless. And someone said there was housing. So I got into the university. And it was transformative, as I've already conveyed. But in the process of moving around, I learned to really pay attention to my environment. I didn't realize that it was just a defense mechanism, but and the power was much greater than just ensuring my safety, for a myriad of reasons that I can go in later on, go into more detail if necessary or useful. In the process of gaining my understanding that I was much more than a survival entity, if you will, or someone focused on survival, that I could actually thrive, I thought about the utility of higher education, especially through the humanities. And I chose to stay in higher ed. So I initially worked within student services. I quickly moved into instruction. I taught. And then I recognized that these various approaches to inspiring adults' learning were so critical to be meaningful, more of a constructivist approach. And so I went from working at a university in Sonoma County to Stanford to in administration, but always I had in mind, how do we transform the nature of what we do in higher education, where we're not considering disciplines as isolates, but disciplines as interconnected and related to every other area of the institution. So in my role as a dean, I had the opportunity to bring together faculty who had never met with one another before, even in the same discipline of humanities. I was dean of the Division of Humanities, Language Arts, and Social Sciences. So there were folks in the English department, ESL, psychology, sociology, as well as people in other divisions like business, mathematics, and sciences, the career technical education area. We formed a small group of about 20 individuals. And we met on a regular basis. We just talked about higher education. We talked about learning. We talked about facilitating student success. We looked at our data that was happening in terms of how our students were faring, who they were, how they successfully, if they successfully got through our system, how we went about our practices, our teaching methods. Did we inspire them to self-initiate their own learning? If so, what tools we provided? What best or effective practices we wanted to share with the rest of the team that was working very well in this particular area that I would call pockets of excellence, if you will, or domains of excellence. So in that conversation, what happened, what we found, there was much more understanding about the faculty, that they were concentrated initially on themselves. How can I be an effective instructor? How can I ensure that the student get the content? And all of them were concerned about the success of the student, however, that was not so well reflected in the practices. And the more we really took a humanities perspective, concerned about the individual, the being as part of a collective, and how to leverage what we know about human beings, people, what we know about adult learning practices and what facilitates adult learning, all of a sudden we began to free ourselves from these silos and open up to these opportunities to actually advance student success by listening to them, by learning from their own behaviors as well as their own intentions. And we facilitated cross institutional collaboration that led to not just having ESL, English as a Second Language, separate from career technical education or a sociology class, but having contextualized ESL. So we had wood technology with ESL taught in that class. We had culinary arts with ESL taught in the same classroom at the same time. We offered a cosmetology with ESL. We did the same thing with mathematics, technical mathematics. Same thing with English, technical English. So all of a sudden people are, they have to be able to read, write, compute, critically analyze, and otherwise use these fundamental skills in these practical areas, right, in order to prepare them for life-sustaining career positions, but also to transfer to a four-year institution of their choice, in and out of California, public or private. And yet, what we recognize is that some students are going to do well no matter what. And let me be very frank. It doesn't matter what institution we're working at or we're leading. Some students are going to do well in spite of us. What we needed to do was make certain that all students were successful because we leveraged who they were, where they were going, and the capacity that we had to work with our local community to make things work more fundamentally and successfully. So that's part of the drive that I had, and my drive was inspired by the drive of faculty and staff who had the same bottom line interest. And it was also further inspired by students themselves who stood up and said, yeah, this works for me, no it doesn't, and here's what we need in order to be more effective. And then it was further reinforced by the community itself, community-based organizations, businesses and industry. So that gives you some details.
Well, that's a great kind of overview there, actually. Well, let's kind of go back to there's several pieces here. And Catherine, by the way, if you want to jump in at any point, do that. So when people think of community colleges, they often think, oh, it's a way to get a practical skill, to kind of get some traction in the economy. And there's an overarching trend now in all of our education of like, how do we get people prepared for jobs, that kind of stuff. And so I'm interested in, given that kind of preconception or from a lot of people, including probably people going there, but certainly people outside, how, when you brought up kind of the humanities or its valued, how did that kind of go over? Did people think of it, did you have to make an argument there, or were people
No, it's, when we don't talk about, we don't use the word humanities. What we do is live it, right? Humanities, what does the humanities foster? It fosters critical thinking faculties, right? Or development of our critical skills, our ability to think more substantively, analyze things with data. It enables us to actually open our hearts, our minds, so that we can feel more deeply and passionately. It enables us to connect the dots, you know, triangulate disparate information. That's what the humanities does. The arts, that whether they're performing their fine arts, they get to us in a way that mathematics might not. They get to us in a way that biology may not. However, understanding aspects of, well, first of all, how to read, how to write, how to compute, how to critically analyze, ensures that we're able to leverage and be effective in the area of mathematics, in the area of biology, in the area of physics, in the area of psychology. So the humanities gives us the tools, if you will, to be that individual who can be successful as a student, so that that individual is able to move on to a life-sustaining career position. It's a prerequisite to being able to go on to a four-year college, accredited college or university, and be successful. The humanities provides the prerequisite skills to ultimately lead to something much more fundamental and profound, right? The ability for the individual to understand self in a way that no document that's written to date that I'm aware of fully explains. The person understands that he or she is a sentient being with great capacity, and we have yet to be able to determine what that is. And it's through these different, the exploration of the mind, of the soul, of the body, physically, spiritually, sexually, otherwise, do we gain a better appreciation of our capacity to create a world context that's healthier, that's more respectful and responsive to the needs of individuals, not only the kind of the basic needs of safety and security and food, but the broader needs of aspiration and self-actualization. And we can come up with other kinds of terms that gets to that. So we didn't use humanities as a term to say let's move in this direction. We use the reality of what humanities provide. I like to believe that much of the time what we do as professionals, as colleagues, as human beings, we think about the ends we're trying to achieve. And we work backwards and ask ourselves, how do we get there? We don't say we're trying to be humane only. We say, we're trying to transform from the conditions we're at currently to these greater, or these more, this aspirational state that leads to greater, more remarkable conditions for everyone. So we break down the humanities, if you will, and we don't parcel and say, okay, we only deal with sociology over here, psychology over there. Any of our classes, you'll find that our faculty are actually teaching multiple discipline content in their classroom, although for accreditation purposes and for standard purposes, if you will, industry and discipline related, they are very specific, but they integrate. Because who are we if not an integrated being? And the humanities allow us to not only understand that, but live that much more fully.
Totally love this. Now, one of the things that we've said, and maybe Catherine, you want to chime in here too, is did you find resistance from your faculty in terms of that cross-disciplinary nature, or people in the humanities fields kind of crossing over and working in more practical spaces, or vice versa? I'm just curious how you got over that, or to what extent you found that in your instance.
Well, we find faculty are humans, and there's diversity among our team, and that's what ensures that we're much more remarkable in our subsequent performance, because we take that diversity, including the friction, the desire to maintain the status quo. We do have some faculty who don't believe that we should be moving in a remarkably different direction. But the good news is that we don't focus on trying to bring on all folks as early adopters. We focus on those who understand and get it from their vantage point with their expertise, and we take those early adopters, we expose what they're doing and the significance of what they're doing to student success, to ensuring student equity, to ensuring the community is better served and able to meet the needs that it has established, that we said that we're in alignment with. So we provide the evidence, and we, on a consistent basis, make all that work accessible so that those faculty who have chosen to be, as we might call them, outliers or isolates, etc., they're still part of our team. There's some things we have to learn from them as to why they want to stay there and how to bring them on board. So it's not about changing their mind, it's about allowing them to experience some things so that they too choose to transform. But we're not stopping. We don't move in a particular direction unless we know it's in the best interest of the community and we've done our due diligence. So we do have some folks who say that's why do we need to integrate? We don't need to contextualize. It's really about just transfer. It's really just about getting them into jobs. The majority of our faculty, by design, because, and I have to say I'm very lucky, I've been at this institution over 13 years, initially as dean, then vice president, now president. And I've hired the majority of the faculty here who are full-time. And so those folks are here for that same reason. They're here to transform lives. They're here to be additive to ensuring the solutions that we seek are in fact actualized. So we have very few individuals who are going to stay in that same zone, but they have a right to. That's part of academic freedom. And more importantly, it's part of the diversity that we're to honor. They have a strong belief for a reason, and we have to learn from that. So there may be some things that we're clueless about, that with this open discourse that's continuous, not just a one-off, continuous, we can learn why they have very strong beliefs and leverage that even as we continue to move forward with this holistic approach to education. Now, let me just be very clear. My intent is not to say that we're perfect. We're nowhere near perfection. We have a lot of work to do. But what we've done as an institution is recognize that we've had gaps. And the gaps are because of us, not because we can blame it on systems or lack of dollars. We have woefully insufficient funding for this institution. However, there are many institutions around this planet that have less resources than we, and yet they're successful. Why are they successful? Well, there are things that we're learning from those institutions, even though they're shotgun homes in the South or in other countries. What we find to be salient are these key aspects of the humanities, this deep appreciation for the other, whoever the other is, this profound understanding that we must understand what we don't understand in order to be effective in facilitating engagement, learning, and success. That it's not about the individual who's the facilitator of learning being the sage on the stage, the actor, the all-knowing. It's about a collaborative process with students, with faculty colleagues. It's interesting. This morning I had an interview with one of our CIS candidates, remarkable young man, computer information systems. He talked about the importance of leveraging faculty. So he's someone I've already decided we're going to be hiring. He talked about his strengths and neutralizing his weaknesses by leveraging his colleagues, faculty across the campus, whether they're in sociology, they're in chemistry, they're in physics, they're in our welding program, we can go on and on. He talked about leveraging the fact that we have environmental control technology and national science initiative here at this institution to help motivate individuals to enroll in the CIS program and build a bridge to end up working where he's been working for some years at one of the national labs. So he talked about that. He's living it. He works with community-based organizations. He's worked with the Unified School District in identifying youth who had less than a 2.0, specifically for a summer program that's all about understanding how to experience learning. What a concept, through this whole notion of coding. And he purposely looked for blacks, Latinos, Native Americans, Pacific Islanders because of their poor success rate overall, and females, and made certain that that room of 40 individuals was replete with support. 15 industry partners in that room. ESL, English, math, and counseling faculty in that room. So in this intensive summer program, they experienced the humanities. He never used the word humanities. We never built it as a humanities course or intensive during the summer. It was a boot camp. The youth from the high school, those individuals, were off the chain. They all stayed. They stayed for that intensive Monday through Friday. I think it was 9 to 1 or 8 to 1. They were there on time. They had to be there through the end in order to be successful. One went on to Harvard. 3 came into this district. Others were still 10th and 11th graders. They all stayed, and they're all moving forward. But the whole point of doing that, and his discussion about it, even with football students, and getting back to the less than 2.0, got them here to the college. In a year and a half, over 90% of them went on to transfer. Transfer to 4-year institution. Started here with the less than a 2.0, purposely chose them, got them here, played football, ensured that they, on average, had over a 3.0 when they transferred. Now, one could say, oh, it's about playing football, winning the game. No, for these young people, it was about transferring. That was really the game they wanted to win. And so the incentive for us was to ensure that we had, and it's an incentive for us because we love this, is to ensure that we had a wraparound series of opportunities for them with a very structured set of objectives. You do these things, you follow this schedule, you will be out. But that schedule will be all about you. It's all about you understanding your capacity. You have the capacity to be a 4.0 student. It's about application. It's about investment of time. We have a responsibility to let you understand your capacity. You can read for understanding. You can write with clarity. You can actually engage in artistic expression through the theater department. You can build something in the culinary arts department, whatever you want to do. You ultimately want to transfer, but we want you to experience some things that are very responsive to your own needs and your learning preferences or predispositions so that you can be successful. I feel like I'm just rambling, but I just wanted to share with you that's an example of creating a culture by bringing on the right people who are already there. It's not about convincing. And having them, as new to the organization, help to continue this organizational learning so that those who've been here for a long time, they learn from our colleagues.
I would, so you've been mentioning students, and we were talking about the faculty a little bit here, and we can get back to that in a minute, but I just, as an overview here, I'm just trying to get the students. One of the things that community colleges are also known for is for really providing access to higher education from different communities. As you, and you've been there for a dozen years, you know, when these kids come out of these different communities or more disadvantaged situations or marginalized communities or different ethnic or racial backgrounds, what's your understanding of their appreciation or desire to be engaged in the humanities as opposed to, hey, I need a job, I really need to make some money, I like something very practical, give me the business administration degree or something. Anyhow, just I'd be curious on your kind of, talk about the students a little bit now, and you know, that would be helpful.
Well, let me say that in response to this question as well as your previous question, community colleges have been perceived as, oh, it's a place where you just go to prepare to transfer, go to get a job. And most of the folks who come here, they need a job. They need a job immediately. They're from low-income backgrounds. A number of them are homeless. Some of them, if they're not homeless, they're couch surfing, which essentially they're homeless. And many of them have no access to food. So we're actually in different ways providing food. It's pretty desperate for a number of our individuals. And not all of our students are right out of high school. Many of them stopped out, dropped off, or felt pushed out. And we have a significant number who could have gone on to a four-year institution who end up here. So let's talk about those who are clearly economically disadvantaged and come in here unprepared for the college-level work. They want to get in and out. They don't even know how to get in and out. They want to transfer. They don't even know what that means. So when they're exposed to the humanities, these individuals are quite remarkable. And a lot of faculty love working at Laney College because when they're in that classroom and they ask a question, they're expecting, and if they have 40 students, they will likely get at least 38 responses to that one question. The person may not have the answer that's being the appropriate answer or the correct answer, but the students are engaged. And their level of engagement demonstrates a level of consciousness about their environment, about themselves in relationship to the environment. And so even in a math class, the humanities is brought, is embedded because of the nature of the students who are in that classroom. They're asking to contextualize. They're demanding to contextualize that math. Well, how do I use that in the real world? Well, what's the relevance of this calculus to my well-being? You know, statistics, really, can I use that? And the degree to which the faculty is prepared to engage that student takes off. And so it's our responsibility as educators, administrators, faculty, classified staff, all of us, to ensure that we're ready to respond to those individuals. The majority of our students come in who question. That's core to the humanities. Question that piece of art that you see on the wall. Question that magical performance. How did he or she or they do that dance? What was the point of that performance? You know, what's that? It's so much drama, but was there something embedded in it since it's based upon whatever it's based upon? Causing people to think deeply, and that's what our students are primed to do. So they're already ready for a humanities type educational experience, and that's the power. And quite frankly, I think most people are. If we just allow them as little infants to continue to say yes, question, why, in a way where we fill them with all kinds of ideas, because I don't believe they're already empty vessels. I think they come with all kinds of their own knowing, and they're looking to understand how that knowing, whatever that pre-knowing, innate knowing may be, relates to what they're experiencing now. Makes me think about this artist. I had, when I worked at Sonoma State University back in the 80s, I had him come to our intercultural center to put up a fabulous array of native art. I mean, it was absolutely exquisite. And he was telling me about his son. He and his wife chose to live in an area outside of Chino, California. It was off the grid. No electricity, no running water. They chose to live that way. They wanted their son to have this more so-called pure life, if you will. And his son said to him, he says, "Dad, what is this all about?" The son was looking out the window of the living room. His dad was in a kitchen workspace working on his art. And his dad looked up at his son trying to figure out what his son was looking at and says, "What do you mean? I don't know." And he says, "Life. What is it about?" This kid's about 3 or 4 years old, as he said. And his dad said, "Well, son, I don't know." And the son goes, "Yes, you do. You just don't remember." When he shared that, he was sharing that in disbelief. He was still challenged by his 3-year-old, 4-year-old son, illuminating and helping to remind him that he had more insights, that even his magical artwork didn't remind him of. So my fundamental belief, and many of my colleagues' belief, is that we come here knowing the challenge is for the rest of us to facilitate in that young infant, in that child, in that teenager, in that young adult, in that elder, ultimately, the continued reflection, deep reflection, through reading, through writing, through observing, through experiencing the nature of everything. I mean, after all, that's what so-called scientists do, right? Constantly testing, coming up with a hypothesis, testing it, taking it through a formal process to review and test. That's what we do when we're medical doctors, right? We're looking at the research and we're testing and we're trying to figure out what may be going on. That's an ailment, or how do we ensure that we guard against certain ailments? That's what we do as educators. We're trying to figure out who our students are and then critically assess their needs and then create a curriculum to facilitate them getting to where they need to be based upon what we have established as standards. That's what we do with life. As mothers and fathers, as siblings, we're trying to navigate the terrain of a household. We're planning. As we're living in neighborhoods and part of a civic, engaged community, we're trying to figure out what do we want tomorrow, next year, next 10 years. Everything is about the humanities.
That is just so inspiring. I really I hate to interrupt to even ask you a question because I'm just blown away by this. But when you brought up welders, I wondered if you did that in response to some of the recent conservative and liberal critiques of higher ed. The idea that welders will make more than philosophers, so why would we train anyone in philosophy? Or as President Obama, his comments about art history. And I have to say, I love looking at the website for the college because the first slide that came up when I opened up that page was a young woman creating art, which was amazing for, I think, for a community college. So I guess what I want to ask about is, it seems clear that the humanities have a huge role in structuring higher education around the idea of the whole person, right, and educating for life for the whole person, and also in individual students' lives. What can we say to employers who, and actually a Wall Street Journal reporter asked me this question last week. I don't see what the value of education in humanities is to somebody who's going to go work in a bank or be a welder. What can you tell me about the value of that? I would just be very interested in hearing what you have to say to that.
I want to say a couple things. Actually, I want to say multiple things, but I'll say two salient things. One, we already experience what happens when we take away the arts, fine and performing. We take away sports, which is part of athletics. It's an art form. We take away physical exercise. We take away kinesiology. really know what that's like in the high schools as we eliminated what we consider to be fringe or on the margin unnecessary add-ons to core education. We only need math. We only need English. We only need, you get where I'm going.
Mm-hmm.
We look at students' performance. It has plummeted, especially in California, with the divestment in core areas that are critical. Yes, we've had economic challenges, but we have found a way to invest in prisons, in the military, you can add in the blanks.
Mm-hmm.
We, as a society, we demonstrate who we are as a human species based upon how we spend our time and how we devote other resources, where we devote other resources. The degree to which I think, quite frankly, we will experience greater levels of health and well-being as a society is highly correlated and arguably causal with the degree to which we invest in the humanities. So what I would say, and I have said publicly in op-ed pieces, etc., is that there's no place I will be where the humanities will not be an important part, embedded, incorporated within that educational institution. And that includes the classics. It is absolutely essential. It's knowing our history. It's understanding why we feel what we feel. And knowing that there's limitations on that understanding. There's so much we don't know. And even less we would know if we didn't have the humanities. What is the humanities? It's almost everything. Okay? So it's a false discussion. It's absolutely ridiculous. Someone wrote, and better than I can articulate right now, so I'm humble enough to know that yes, we can have lawyers, we can have doctors, etc., and have no humanities courses. And yet, will they ask the critical questions that are preconditions to being effective, short of having those humanities-related courses or those experiences? Will they go deeper and reflect? It's like, okay, we can train aviation specialists. We can have people build buildings. You know, we do building automation. We do electronics control. We do construction management. We have a myriad of technical. In fact, 50% of our offerings are career technical education. The faculty who lead those units are clearly aware, and they can talk much more. They're much more articulate than I am about, and persuasive about the critical importance of the humanities embedded in these areas. They understand. It's not a concept to them. It's not, let's read this and let's just sign off and check off to see if we've got these things. It's a lived experience. We know the difference. We live the difference when we don't have what we need. And as a society, we're shameful, quite frankly. We're shameful in that we have these dualistic arguments that are absolutely non-starters, and they're harmful.
I'm wondering, I work with a lot of military, a lot of vets who've come back to college, and I think many of them started out on a path where they didn't do that well in high school, and then the options they had were pretty low-level job or maybe community college, and they weren't really ready for college, so they end up joining the military. By the time I get them, they're so hungry for the humanities. And I wondered if you had seen some of that when you're more, your adult, non-traditional students.
The majority of our students are hungry for the humanities, whether they're right out of high school, but certainly the older adults. And our veteran students, absolutely.
Yeah.
They've lived, they've witnessed, and they've witnessed some atrocities. And they want to understand why. They want to understand why at a deeper level. They want to be able to understand the history and be able to prepare for the future. And that's what the humanities does. So yes, they're hungry. I have a professor who teaches core humanities courses. And I say humanities broad, but he teaches the classics, right? Introduction to humanities and some advanced courses in philosophy, et cetera, ethics, et cetera. And when he goes in, I remember evaluating him over a series of years. He's tenured, exceptional professor. When he starts with his class, most of the students in his class are like, this guy doesn't know what he's doing. The evaluations from the students are like, oh my God, this is a waste of my time. He doesn't get to the point, he doesn't give us the answers, and da 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 da. It's all about he's not giving us, he's not directing us, he's not making us. It's about the instructor. Take those same students, the middle of the class, and it's a mix. At the end of the class, that semester, each semester, the students are like, oh my God, this guy is off the charts. He's the most remarkable instructor I have ever had. I'm going into the humanities. What he did was he engages the Socratic approach and much more.
That's very frustrating to students sometimes.
Oh, it's absolutely frustrating for some students. For others, they're like, this is kind of weird, but this is kind of interesting. You know, I've never been there because I've been told what to do all my life. Well, what the humanities does is say, it's not about us directing your life. It's about you self-initiating. It's about you recognizing that you literally are in the driver's seat. What you hold between your ears, your consciousness, is who you are. And you can actually reframe that if you choose to. And that's what this instructor does masterfully. He is absolutely challenging, frustrating for the average student, but at the end of that semester, they're like, oh my God. People have gone from biology, I'm going to humanities, and they end up at Cal or wherever, at UC Berkeley. But the point that I'm making is that we engage in a lot of nonsense conversations because they're beautiful sound bites that get the attention that we need. And what we're doing is we're causing harm. We're causing a lot of harm when we do that. And we have the capacity as human beings, and those of us who choose to be formally educated, and I don't mean just in terms of in an accredited institution of higher learning, but also we actually organize our own ongoing learning. We have a responsibility to remind folks that those kinds of so-called discursive whatever are harmful. Humanities is the nature of who we are. It's not an add-on. Even if we chose to eliminate the so-called investment of dollars, we are artists. We are dancers. We are creators. We are thinkers. And the degree to which we choose to work in a way to shut that down and otherwise harm one or the other, we actually eliminate anything that allows us to get closer to what we say we are, a democracy.
I love this. Now, unfortunately, we're getting towards the end of this interview, and we don't want to take much more of your time as well, but I just want to push one more time. So we've talked about the faculty internally, how they appreciate it, the students themselves. You started to talk about the outside employers, but I do know a big part of your job, and from what I understand, is doing these partnerships with local businesses and also tech. You're sitting in the middle of the area. There's a big tech boom. There's also a real understanding that it's not a diverse enough workforce, and there's a lot of interest in that. I'm just curious, from the outside world coming into you, or what you interact with them in the kind of, in particularly in tech, honestly, I'd be interested, given that you mentioned that CIS guy. Do you feel that they like that kind of approach to education? Do you
much more so.
Give me the facts. So. Go ahead.
Yeah, much more so, because you know why? They need not just individuals with the technical expertise, which they're getting from a number of places, right? They need folks who are culturally sensitive, who can work in teams, who can actually assess things in ways to anticipate solutions. And short of the so-called broad humanities education, one may have the technical skills but not able to advance the organization, whether that unit or the organization as a whole. And they need folks who actually can think critically on their own. Know the importance, not just do it because it's required, but understand the importance of working collaboratively. These things are fundamental to the humanities, right? And so part of the I remember when I was at UC Berkeley, and I was in the High School of Business, and we were in a seminar, and one of the lead professors, in fact I think it was Glenn Carroll, the then director of the PhD program in Organizational Behavior and Labor Relations, fascinating, remarkable man. He was talking about how particular corporations were criticizing UC Berkeley High School of Business. they were praising it in terms of having students with 4.0s, 4.5s, technical expertise, remarkable students in that regard. They can pass any tests with flying colors. But they were coming in and they didn't know how to work with groups. They didn't know how to communicate effectively. They didn't know how to research. They didn't self-initiate engagement. They were waiting for someone to tell them what to do, in other words. And essentially, those corporations said to the High School of Business, you got to change your practices. You got to improve the curriculum. And what they were really talking about were what we call the Truman Commission of the late 30s, early 40s, the skills competencies, SCAN competencies, right? We're talking about the necessary skills to ensure someone's successful in the workplace. What are those skills? People skills, interpersonal skills, teamwork, knowing how to work effectively as a team, being able to investigate, self-initiate exploration of solutions to problems. That's what they need. So what does the humanities teach? Critical thinking, understanding human behavior, understanding why the individual may function the way the individual functions, questioning reality in order to come up with a completely different perspective of reality. Folks who are in their various professions are using what the humanities, if they're effective, that is, they're using so many aspects of what the humanities facilitates in terms of learning. I hope that helps.
That totally helps. And in fact, this whole interview has been awesome. You are like a poster child for the humanities.
Oh.
We'll say.
It's my honor.
We really appreciate your spending the time with us and giving us your views. It's very, very helpful to our project, and it's very, very helpful, I think, for those that will be watching this video. Thank you very much. And we're going to have to, unfortunately, close a wonderful, wonderful conversation.
It's been an honor.
Thank you.
Thank you.